Hello friends, my name is Jessica Mark and I'm an Ortho-Bionomy instructor in Asheville, North Carolina. And I'd love to share with you today a little bit of self-care for the low back. There's so many options of self-care for the low back, so I hope to bring you lots in the future. But to start with, one of the elements that we can bring to it is trying to find fluidity and movement back into the low back. So much of the time this area can get stagnant and craniosacral rhythms can be off or not as balanced. Fluidity in general can feel stagnant or feeling sluggish. And so tension builds and imbalance builds, and we want to help the body remember that it has that mobility to move things through. So you can do this exercise standing, but you can also do it lying down on your back. So I'm going to talk you through it first, and then we'll do it together. Really, the movements of the pelvis are just in that anterior and posterior ways of moving the ilium. So we're tipping the movement, tipping both ilia forward for an anterior rotation, and then we're rolling back behind our sits bones into that posterior rotation. So we'll start with that movement as we're lying down, back and forth, and then we might go into a side to side movement. So kind of one ilium coming up towards the ceiling and then the other coming up towards the ceiling. And then we're going to make that come into a whole clock or a whole circular pattern here. So sometimes we call this exercise the pelvic clock. And we can think about the xiphoid process up here by the at the end of the sternum as 12 o'clock. And then we can think of the pubic bone as 6 o'clock. 3 o'clock the left ASIS, anterior superior iliac spine, and then 9 o'clock the right ASIS. And so if you think about it as we lie down, you'll be thinking about rolling a marble around that whole clock face and really finding the fluidity in each direction. Usually for me, the hardest places are those diagonals. The front and back is okay, or the anterior and posterior directions, and even the side to side can be easy. But when I start to connect them all, sometimes those diagonals get a little bit fuzzy. And we want to find that fluidity in each direction. So you may do 3 or 4 times in one direction and then 3 or 4 times in the opposite direction. So here's what it looks like lying down. So if you want to find a comfortable place, the best is usually on the floor with a mat or a blanket. Sometimes the bed can be a little too soft, or even a massage table. So I advise you to try something with a little bit more firmness underneath your low back. But of course you want it to be comfortable. So we'll start with the pelvis in what's called a neutral position. This is where you have a little bit of space under your low back and the floor or the bed or the table that you're in. And you want to feel that marble maybe starting at the navel. And as you come into a posterior rotation, the marble rolls up towards your xiphoid process. And then as you come into an anterior rotation, you're going to slowly roll that marble towards your pubic bone. And just try that a few times, coming in. Now this is less of a muscular exercise, although you could do it, and it's great abdominal strengthening for that. And for this exercise, though, we're thinking more about the fluidity. So as I move into this posterior rotation of my pelvis, and then into the anterior rotation, what I'm noticing is that I want to feel the fluidity. So I almost feel like I have a little figure 8 happening here as I roll back and forth between those two directions. And I notice that there's more of an ease and there's more of an evenness of tone and direction of movement or range of movement happening between those two. And then I may notice the 3 o'clock and the 9 o'clock versions. So just pressing the left ASIS down towards the floor as the right one heads up towards the ceiling. And then reverse that. The 9 o'clock heads towards the floor as the 3 o'clock lifts up towards the ceiling. So there's a teeter-tottering that's happening here, back and forth. And again, I sort of start to begin to notice it 2-dimensionally, and then it moves into this 3-dimensional movement. Even though I'm going side to side, there's a little bit of a figure 8 or an infinity that's happening between the left and the right sides of my ilium. So once you've got those two down and it feels comfortable, then you might try the whole clock face. So if 12 o'clock is up towards my xiphoid process and 3 o'clock is my left ASIS, I'm going to really move the marble to 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and then continue on 4, 5 until I hit that anterior rotation at 6 o'clock, and then 7, 8, coming over to 9 o'clock, 10, 11, and back up to 12. So here we go, rolling the marble. Now I'm in a posterior rotation here, and then I'm going to slowly roll that marble to 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and at 3 o'clock, my left ASIS is pressing down towards the table and my right is up towards the ceiling. Then continuing on to 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, I'm really in an anterior rotation here. So I've got a lot of space underneath my lumbar and a little bit of my lower thoracics. And then continuing on 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, my left ASIS is up towards the ceiling, my right is pressed down towards the table. 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and 12 o'clock. So now I'm just going to do that fluidly, nice and easy, moving through the space, as juicy as you can, connecting the dots so that it's really seamless. So I broke it down for you so you could feel the directions. And then it's about how much fluidity can you get in that movement. And then you might try the opposite direction. So slowly rotating counterclockwise there, moving around the clock face, a couple times in those directions, and then bring it back and come back to stillness. And as you come back to stillness, allow the lower organs to feel their heaviness and feel their weightedness, and feel the lower back really settle from that movement. And then after you've done that, you want to slowly come up to sitting, and again do a little wiggle around, finding your sits bones again, feeling the base of your support in the pelvis so that the whole spine can feel like its foundation is supported in that strong lower back and pelvis area. So check it out. You'll find your own combinations too of different ways to move and things that you like in those different directions. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks, y'all.